Hello and welcome to my HMG Navigator tutorial series. I'm going to begin these series of tutorials with an installment that basically goes through the whole program. It's going to be an HMG Navigator overview, simulating a geosteering experience where we take some offset type logs and add models or add markups, tops, and formations to these offset logs, and then we will use that to correlate the vertical section of this lateral prior to the kickoff point, and then during the build we will correlate the build where we will then select a geosteering start depth so that we can land our lateral and then add a target zone to the offset logs and correlate the lateral in the target zone as we drill out horizontally. You can download my program at www.hmgsoftwarellc.com. Presently, this is a free beta version, and I would really like to encourage people to, after using my program, to please email me or call with suggestions, comments, future features you would like to see incorporated into this program. The first thing I do is I'm going to open up HMG Navigator, and on the left here we have these 6 red buttons. These represent different pages that you can select, and each page does something specific and different. So we're going to go to models, and this is where we enter our offset logs. And the first question it's going to ask is, what is the scale system I'm using? And since we are using the imperial scale system, I'm selected the imperial selection. Now, on the right, I hit that create button, and that created 3 blank models, and then I'm going to go to this folder offset logs, and I'm going to load in my first blank LAS file, and there it is. And I'm going to change the scale from whole log to 200 feet, scroll down, so I have a blank gamma log entered in, and I mean blank, it has no markups yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is scroll down to this nice little bentonite bed and add a formation top. So I'm just going to use my mouse to select that top, draw in that top real quick. When you release the mouse, it creates a top. It's got a generic name, formation. I'm going to change that. This happens to be the Lower Mancus top. And I'm going to change the color. And now I'm going to change the title of this offset log to the state 36, because that is the name of it. And we are, now I'm going to go down and I'm going to put in the target zone, which goes from 5474. So 5474. And I'm going to draw that, and it goes about to 5535, right about here. And it's mostly a sandstone. This is a gallop sand we'll be drilling. So I'm just going to call it target zone. And I'm just going to stay with those 2 formation tops and zones for the purposes of this demonstration, not get too complicated. Now for the other 2 offsets, rather than load a gamma file, I'm going to load a previously made markup file that I created prior to this tutorial. So this shows you how you can create a markup file and then save it for later use. Alright, now that we have our offset models loaded into the program, we're going to go over to the survey page, and I have 2 lateral selections I can choose from, well plan and lateral. So I'm going to start with the well plan, and I'm just going to load in the well plan. Now this is not, you don't have to have the well plan in. I like to have it in. It will show up on the geosteering page here. Down here you can check the well plan and it will be displayed, but you don't have to use it. Now I'm going to go to the lateral, and this is a simulated geosteering, so let's just pretend that we've drilled up to the kickoff point. And the point of this part of the exercise is to show you how you can use this program to correlate prior to your kickoff point. In this case, we are in a deviated part of the well, and if you go to the well plan, you can see the purpose was to drill negative vertical section before, to the north, drilling to the north before starting our build and turning the wellbore to the west and drilling the lateral to the west. Now that we got some survey data in there, we're going to go over to this other page, LWD Editor, and this page has a Load LWD File button, which allows you to load any LAS file, and I have a LAS file that is called a kickoff point. So that has all the data to the kickoff point. We're going to select our gamma curve, and there it displays our LWD gamma up here, and also in a spreadsheet where it can be edited. Now if we go over to the vertical page, the blue there is our LWD data. Now this is a TBD, these blue numbers, this is TBD depth. So it takes your LWD gamma data and your survey data and creates an LWD TBD log for the purpose of correlating your vertical portion. So now that I have this, I'm changing the scale to, I'm going to change it to 500 feet, and I'm going to go over here right on this right in these pink buttons. These are our models that we have loaded into the file. They are pink because they're not selected. If you left click them, then they will appear. So I left click the state 36, and lo and behold, there it is. And then if I come down here, this is a button, and if I select this LWD button, and it will toggle me through the active offset logs. And the first one is the state 36. So then and then this scroll bar appears, which is red, which matches the color of that offset log. And I'm gonna move this until I have a nice correlation for the 36. Now I'm going to unselect the 36, put the 43 in there, click this until the state 43 appears, and do the same thing. And that way I can correlate my 3 offset logs to my LWD gamma prior to the kickoff point. And what is nice about this part is I can scroll down here and I can right click it so the markup appears, and there is my lower Mancus. It's got the wrong name, so I'm going to go back to models real quick to the yeah, here we go. This is the wrong name. I'm going to change that to lower Mancus. Save it. And then this is actually should be target zone. And I go back to my vertical. And there we have the lower Mancus. So we now know, based on this correlation, with the state 44, we should hit the lower Mancus at a depth of about 5304 TBD, and we should hit the target zone at about 5509. Now we can unselect it and select the 43, and we should hit the lower Mancus about 5301 TBD, and the target around 5509 TBD. And you can do the same for the 36, and that way you can use this program to help correlate prior to the kickoff point. Now that you have a good correlation prior to your kickoff point, you can select a geosteering start depth. But I'm actually going to hold off on doing that because I like to select a geosteering start depth early on in the build, and we're not at the build yet. So I'm going to load in some more data that takes us about a third to a half of the way through the build. So I'm going to load up some data that takes us to an inclination of about 39 degrees, 40 degrees. And the reason I like this is because sometimes you have some beds thinning and thickening while you're still close to vertical, and you really, you want a good correlation point that is more, while you're getting out on your lateral, that is more indicative of a dip change rather than thickening and thinning of your beds. So I like to wait a little bit into the build, but that's my personal preference. Other people might have different opinions about that, but we're going to go to the vertical page, and now I've loaded data that takes us beyond this lower Mancus top, And you can see we have in the LWD a nice gamma marker that is very close to it. So I'm going to correlate to that on the 43 by just moving it a little bit using the cursor. I'm going to do the same with the 44, which is pretty much right on. And the same with the 36. And then I'm going to go back to my 43 and I'm going to select them all. In fact, I'm going to put all the tops on there too. They're mostly on top of each other. And now I feel like I have a pretty good correlation point, and I think I'm ready to select a geosteering start depth. And the way you do that is you just find a point where you feel pretty comfortable. So I'm pretty comfortable at here. So I'm going to go a little bit above there and just click once, and this green line appears, your geosteering start point here. And if you go to your geosteering page, there you have your LWD log. We have the well plan shown here. We have our LWD log on the model window here, and we have the LWD gamma displayed here. Now I don't have any offset log selected yet, so I'm going to do that now by clicking that control button, which brings this window open. Now this window can be displayed on a second monitor if you have one to get it out of the way. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to use one monitor, and then you can select whichever offset you want to use. We're going to start with the 43, and I'm going to right click it to bring up its markup, and there you see we have the 43 now displayed. This is generally the most important page in the program, this geosteering page, and everything up to this point is sort of prologue, because now we're in the build part of our lateral, and so we loaded our model. So the rest of the time we're going to be spending on this page. So I'm going to go through a few of the features. One is that these blue lines separate the different windows, and for example, this top one is where we put in our total gas and ROP, which I've not loaded any yet, so I'm going to make this window smaller. Later when we add some data, you can make it bigger again. If you want your LWD gamma window to be bigger or smaller, you can move it up and down. And similarly with the correlation window over here, you can move it left and right to make it bigger and smaller. And I need to put in my 43 real quick. And then finally, these buttons here control the scales. In this case, it's the TVD scale. So, for example, there's a lot of room here below our well plan, which we don't need. So I'm going to select this button and make our TVD scale more appropriate for what we're using it for. The log needs to be 2,000 feet, or you can change it to 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 4,000 feet, or you can hit whole log. But since we don't have a lot of data, I'm just going to put it in at 2,000 feet. Finally, over here on the right is where our fault dip control, and you always have at least one selection for your fault dip, which corresponds with your geosteering start depth, which in this case was at 5264. So if I select that, over here on the model canvas, our LWD curve turns purple and dashed, and you can select it by moving your model or your mouse to the bottom of the selected section, and it will change color. Then I press down on the mouse and I can move my LWD curve to match my offset log, and on the right it'll move your beds, your tops, corresponding to whatever dip is selected. So there we go. And then of course you can also fine tune it over here with these buttons. So I can increase my dip by ones, or I can move it down. And then of course to unselect your selected fault dip, you just hit the escape key, or you can come up here and hit this escape button, and then it'll turn it back to its color. Alright, so now we're ready to enter more data. I've added data that takes us to the landing point, and we have a pretty good correlation that's shown over here on the left, although it gets a little bit off once we get into the target zone. So I'm going to sort of show you how you can add some faults or add some dip changes to make that a closer fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this scale to 200 feet and scroll down And the black is tracing the I think this is the 43 pretty well till about here. So I'm going to pick a point right about there. We have a good correlation there, and then on the cross section where I want to put a dip change, I just left click, and that'll make a new selection. And what I'm going to do is select that new selection right there, and then I'm going to select the selection below. There we go. So there we have a better fit. And now we have our landing data well correlated. Now that we have the landing correlated, I'm going to load the rest of the data for the lateral. And change this to a 2,000 foot scale. Move this down. And I'm going to put a dip change right at the landing. Select it. Then I'm going to put another one about 500 feet out. Select that one. So now we're starting to go up section. Now it's a little bit noisy, as you can see here, our LWD data. So I can change my scale to give it a little bit more. I'm going to change both scales, that and the state 43. Give it a little more delineation of the curves. There we go. And I'm also, if you open up the control button, you can have this LWD smoothing function, which will smooth out our LWD curve. There we go. So now it makes it much easier to correlate. As you can see, I just move that so I have a nice little correlation with the 43. Now I'm going to hit the escape button, which unselects my selected segment. And I'm going to add another control dip right about here. I'm going to select it, and there we go. Gives us a nice little match. I'm going to change this to 100 foot. So you can see I have a nice correlation here, but this doesn't really correlate that well right there. So I'm going to put another, so that correlates well, and then I'm going to move this one down to there, and then I'm going to hit the escape key, and you can see every time you add a new dip selection, so we have a little gamma curve here, so I'm going to pick a dip selection after that, select it, and then I can just move this down, change my dip to, there we go, great. Have a great correlation there. Hit the escape key again, add another one about here, select it. There we go. That's a much better fit. I'm going to change. There we go. So you can see this, you just use your mouse to select to make a new fault dip. I call them fault dips because they can be either a fault or a dip. In this example, we're dealing with exclusively with dips. We don't have a lot of faulting in the San Juan Basin. However, it is easy enough to add a fault. To do that, we have our selection here. Just go down to this Fault Dip Adjust Toggle button, click it, and now when you come over here and select your target and move it up and down, it will move your selection up and down as if it was a fault rather than a dip change. And if you don't like it, you can come out here and just do the undo. We're almost at the end. Put one right about here. There we go. And then the last one. There we go. And then I hit the escape key. I'm going to collect this whole log, and it gives us our whole log. You can see our different dip changes selected here. Up here, every time I selected a new dip, it changed the color. You can open up the control, and you see you have this selection of different things you can do. So you can hit clear, and that'll make everything black. Or you can hit dip faults, which will change the color at every dip or every fault. Or you can do this up down, and what that does is it gives you two colors. It gives you blue when you're going down section and green when you're going up section. Now since this one, in this example, we landed near the base of the target and TD'd at the top of the target, we're mostly going up section, but there are few places here, like right around here where it's blue and here where it's blue, where basically our inclination, we were moving down section because our inclination was lower than our dip. So, you know, that's some of the things you can do. And then there's this TP1000. What that does is it makes everything transparent except for the last 1,000 feet so that it's easier to see. But I'm going to keep it with the dip faults color scheme. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load in, I'm going to go to this data page, and I'm going to load in some ROP and gas data. And then you go to the Geo Steering page, and there it is. Now one thing, as you move your cursor around, the parameters are shown over here. For here they're showing the total gas ROP. Here it's the gamma. Here it's your survey parameters. If you don't like that, you can come over here and this F1 or this params button, you can either hit the F1 key or this params button, and then it'll get rid of it. It won't show. Similarly, if you don't want your dip changes to show, you can come over here and click the F3, and then they'll disappear. So that's the basic on how you use my program. I encourage people to download it, use it, and please give me feedback. And I will be, in the following weeks, writing more tutorials on the different aspects of this program, going into more detail on how to use it. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you.